What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today I wanted to go over 5 things that I think Hazard Zone needs to implement in order for it to be a successful game mode over a long period of time. Obviously, as of right now, it is sort of hard to speculate about these types of things since we haven't really heard any official word about Hazard Zone just yet, but there are plenty of leaks and rumours out there giving us somewhat of a good idea on what the game mode is going to be, and there's a video on the channel covering that already if you guys do want to hear more about that. But yeah, without any official word right now, these hopes and wishes are obviously going to be somewhat unrealistic until we actually know what the mode is, which we should hopefully know in the coming months anyway. Before we get into it though, if you guys are new around here and you end up enjoying this video, then do consider subscribing and turning on those notifications so that you don't miss out on any upcoming Battlefield content. There is plenty of exciting stuff on the way, but with that being said, let's get stuck right into it. So the first thing on my list for today's video is that I really hope Hazard Zone can incorporate map variety rather than just being based on one map like Warzone or like Apex and PUBG were initially, as I think that adds a whole lot of replay value to the game and stops it from becoming stale quite as fast. I've played a whole lot of Warzone over the last 18 months. It was essentially my main game all throughout 2020 and at the start of this year, but one thing that has made it very frustrating and it has sort of led it to become pretty stale was the lack of map changes. The game launched with a single map called Verdansk, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Verdansk as a map. I personally think it's one of the better Battle Royale maps in any games to date, but after you play it on repeat for 6, 12 or 18 months, it really did start to become pretty stale. They obviously changed a lot of points of interest, otherwise known as POIs, which don't get me wrong was better than nothing, but after a while the community just got pretty sick of those smaller changes and sort of went crying out for a new map, at which point they kind of just delivered a reskin of the same map, and from there on I think most people started to kind of get over the game quite a bit. Regardless of what Hazard Zone ends up being, I think map variety is going to be huge in keeping the player base engaged and interested in the game mode, at least in the long run anyway. I think if it launched with only 1 or 2 maps for example, then that's fair enough. I think people can definitely enjoy a single map for a while if the mode is enjoyable enough, but after a while that just won't be enough, and so whether it's at launch or whether it's 6 months later, I definitely think more maps need to be added to the rotation in order to keep the game mode fresh. Judging by some data mining from a well-known data miner by the name of Temporal, it does seem as though the regular maps will actually be involved in Hazard Zone. He's shown quite a few bits of information that seem to back that up, at least as of right now, and so hopefully he is correct and there will end up being some very solid map variety in the game mode. Moving on to the second thing on the list, and this one is pretty simple. Hazard Zone needs to have intense competitive gameplay. Battlefield in general is mostly considered to be a rather casual game, and that's one thing that it does really well in my opinion. You can sort of jump on for a few rounds and play with your mates. You don't need to sweat your dick off just to enjoy it. It's just a good bit of fun as a video game should be, and I think Battlefield as a franchise has nailed that on the head. With that being said, there is obviously a place for competitive gameplay in these types of games as well, and generally that's what creates that addictive feeling to the game when every game you play has high stakes and it really is intense each and every time. The reason all of these Battle Royale games have blown up over the last 5 years isn't just because of the mode itself, it's because of the high intensity to the gameplay, the addictive feeling of winning a game or getting a high kill game. Those are what most people love about those types of games like Warzone and Apex, more so than the actual Battle Royale genre itself. So if Hazard Zone can have that same intensity and excitement with each and every game that you play, I think that's going to be huge for the game, and from the little teaser that they gave us saying that Hazard Zone is a squad-based high stakes game mode, that does seem as though they're aiming to go down that path, so I cannot wait to hear more in the coming months. Now, the third thing on the list, which somewhat relates to the last one, is that I really think the game needs to have some sort of ranked mode in order to actually give us something to grind for. When you look at a game like Apex and compare it to Warzone, that's the main thing that people tend to say Apex does better in having a ranked mode. It allows you to actually make progress and grind away and trying to climb the ranks, and as much as I don't think it's an absolute necessity, I think in the long run it really does make a difference. Having something to grind for each time you play can add to the enjoyment by just giving you a bit more of a goal every time you play rather than simply jumping on for the fun of it. Most of the games out there that I've personally been the most addicted to in my life have always sort of had an end goal to achieve or a set of ranks to climb, and it just makes you want to keep on coming back and challenging yourself to improve and climb up those ranks each and every time you play the game. I think if they wanted Hazard Zone to be a really competitive game mode, then SBMM is a possibility just to make it fair and balanced for everyone, and although I hate SBMM 99% of the time, I think in games such as Battle Royales or those more competitive shooters, SBMM is actually a decent implementation, just as long as there is actually a reason to have it. In Warzone, for example, with no ranking system, the SBMM kind of seems pointless. Like, why do I have to play against all these beastly players if I'm not actually gaining anything from winning the game? If I can climb up the ranks though and move into a new division or whatever the case may be, then I'm actually fine with SBMM in that situation, because that does just make it as fair as possible, and if I do want to break from the sweatiness, then I can simply go and play all-out warfare instead. Considering Battlefield hasn't really had much of a competitive scene in the past, I'm definitely not expecting this one to become a reality. Honestly, I'll be pretty surprised if Hazard Zone does have a ranked system, but in saying that, they have clearly taken some inspiration from Apex since they're both EA titles, and if Apex can have ranked, then I don't see why Hazard Zone can't either. Now, moving on to the fourth thing in this list, and this one is pretty broad, but that's going to be constant communication. Now, this kind of goes for the whole game, honestly, but I think it is magnified even further for this mode, as anything that's remotely competitive, or I guess, more serious than the typical casual modes, needs to have constant communication and transparency at all times. One thing that really frustrates me about EA games is that I feel their communication is always lacking, and don't get me wrong, many other developers and publishers out there are the same way. It's not like everyone else is perfect and EA just sucks at it, but they definitely do have some issues with transparency and communication, and I think that often causes them to actually step on their own toes. When I say communication, I essentially just mean stuff like constantly giving updates on balancing and bug fixes and all that kind of thing, keeping us in the loop on what we can expect in the coming months in terms of content or changes to the game, and really just not leaving us in the dark. There's nothing more frustrating as a gamer than when something in the game that you love really needs changing or fixing and you just don't hear a word about it for months on end. Communication is completely free, it's relatively quick and easy to do, and it does a world of good for the community when they just know that the devs do truly care about them and hear their concerns. Now, communication doesn't mean that we need a patch every day to fix things, it just means that we need to hear that you are working on a fix. It doesn't mean that we need a new map every month, it just means that we need to see a roadmap or hear some info on what content we are actually going to be getting, rather than just sitting around waiting and hearing absolutely nothing. It often feels like developers and publishers are almost scared to tell their communities bad news, and that is understandable to a degree, but if there's less content on the way than you'd hoped, if something's been delayed, or if there's a bug that's just really hard to fix and it can't be fixed immediately, I'd honestly rather hear that news than hear no news at all, and I have a feeling most people in the community probably feel the same way. Communication and transparency are absolutely key to the success of a game these days in my opinion, and if Hazard Zone and just Battlefield 2042 in general are going to be successful, then I think EA and DICE really do need to improve on their communication overall. Now lastly, and this one is kind of a broad one as well that I thought you guys could comment on as well, but I think the most important thing for Hazard Zone is just that it gives us something to come back to and gives us a reason to keep on playing. Obviously some of the stuff that I've already mentioned has touched on this, the map variety, the ranked play, all of that somewhat is a reason to keep on coming back, but I think there are more layers to that as well. There are rumours and leaks out there that this mode could be somewhat similar to Escape from Tarkov or Hunt Showdown, and those games have plenty of reasons to feel addicted and keep on coming back for more. In those games you can essentially find a ton of awesome loot and weapons and all that kind of stuff, and if you survive the game and manage to make it to the very end, you can actually keep that loot rather than losing it in that game, and those are the smaller aspects that can also keep you coming back for more. Any type of progression can have the same effect, for example having a different progression level than the regular multiplayer or something like that, or having things in the battle pass that can only be unlocked through Hazard Zone, or even some challenges within the mode, or whatever the case may be. Those would be just adding even further to the mode itself and just make it far more addicting for the player, giving us more and more reasons to keep on coming back for more. Like I said, I kind of wanted to keep this one open for you guys to comment on what you think would keep you coming back to the game. There's so many little things that could be implemented, and so I'm really excited to hear what you guys come up with, and if I am lucky enough to have any game changer meetings with the team, then I can also try and implement some of your ideas too, so be sure to leave those down in the comments. But that is going to do it for this one guys. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you are new, then consider subscribing to the channel with those notifications on. If you guys want to support the content that I make here on YouTube, then do consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.